feel better on the weekend. Give my life a better meaning. Let me stay where I've been phased. I feel better on the weekend. I feel better on the weekend. Give my life a better meaning. Let me stay where I've been phased. I feel better on the weekend.
Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Hey, welcome to Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. Glad to see you, glad to have you here. This is episode number 23. It is Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. Fix my headset here. Welcome. If you're watching on the live stream, if you're watching on-demand replay, if you're listening as a podcast, doesn't matter, right? Glad to have you here. Glad to have you tuning in to get your cyber threat intel. If this is the first time that you're listening to the show or tuning in, welcome, first of all. Second of all, typically what we do to start these things off is we give people a few minutes to hop on, to tune in to the stream, and then we go over some show notes real quick, and then we hop into the content. So if you need a snack, if you need a drink, something like that to get you through the show, go run and grab it real quick and hurry back so you don't miss the content. But if you already have that, good on you for being ready. Now, depending on where you're listening to the show from, there's a lot of different ways that you can find the show, right? A lot of people prefer the on-demand or live stream version, so the video format, and you can find that on YouTube, on the John Good Cyber YouTube channel. You can find it on LinkedIn, so on the John Good Cyber page. You can also find it on Twitter, on John Good Cyber, or the Facebook page for John Good Cyber as well. So we're available in all kinds of different formats. And if you join the live stream, you can actually chat in, ask questions, participate in the show, which is awesome, right? Really fun. Now, if you don't make the live stream, you'll be able to still see all the chat and everything because we put it on the screen. So you'll be able to know what people are asking, what people are saying, all those kinds of things, which is still great, right? Not as great as being on the live stream, but still great. If you prefer audio format, so you want to listen to just the audio version, then we have that too. We're available on all the different podcasting platforms. So all you have to do is go to Spotify, iTunes, whatever your favorite platform is, right? Like there's a whole bunch more than just that, but those are obviously really popular. Just search for Cyber Threat Intel. We'll come right up and you can listen that way too. So that is another convenient way to listen to the content. You can also go to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. That's our website. And you can find all the platforms that we're on there as well. You can also find the article feed. So all of the articles that we cover in these episodes, past episodes, this episode, future episodes, right? All those different episodes, you'll be able to find all those articles there. And you can read more into them if there's more details that you want to find out about certain articles. You can also find other articles that we put in there. We also put highlights, we put notes, all those kinds of things. And you can see that, again, by going to the website, and you'll be able to find the article feed right there. So definitely valuable with that as well. If you have professional certifications, so CISSP, Security Plus, anything like that, then you can definitely claim a half a CPE for every one of these episodes. And I highly recommend that, right? So per week, Monday through Thursday, that means 2 CPEs per week. So over a year, you'll have plenty of CPEs or CEUs, continuing education credits to maintain those certifications for free, mind you, right? So that's always good. That's an easy way to get those credits and make sure that you're maintaining those certifications. So looks like we have a few people hopping on the stream. We're still getting more and more people. We have Frosty D. John, my man, can't wait for the stream to start. Well, here we are. We've made it. We are starting. And then Jet Sui, hey, how's it going? Glad to see you. And if you're tuning in on the live stream, let me know where you're tuning in from, right? What part of the world are you tuning in from? What time is it where you're at? I'm always curious to hear where people are tuning in from because we get people from all over, right? All over the world. And it's great to see people tuning in from not just the United States or not just specific country, but everywhere, right? And that's the goal with what we're doing is we're trying to get information out to as many people as possible. So great to have you all on board. Now, with that being said, we still have more people that are hopping on the stream. I see the number keep ticking up. So we'll give it a few minutes here. And while we're waiting for more people to hop on, we'll go ahead and we'll kick it over to talk about our sponsor for this episode, Cyber Training Pro. And I will see you on the other side of that. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today. All right, thanks to Cyber Training Pro for that. We love our sponsors. Sponsors help make this possible, make it possible for free for you, which is great, and we always appreciate that. If you're a company and you're looking to sponsor content or you want to talk about sponsoring content, make sure to check out the description because there is a link with more information about how you can kick that conversation off and how you can sponsor content. So again, we appreciate all of our supporters, all of our sponsors, and everybody that helps make all of this possible. So looks like Kyle's tuning in from San Diego, California, and it's amazing spring weather. I believe it. San Diego is amazing. If you've never been, definitely go there. It is definitely one of those places in the United States that weather-wise and, you know, having the beach and everything like that is just a place that people love to go. There's a lot of issues with San Diego, like traffic and, you know, it's just crowded, but it is definitely a place that is awesome to go to. And Jetsui tuning in from New York City. All right. So it is, let's see. It's little after 8 o'clock there. So 8 o'clock at night. So appreciate you tuning in. Miguel's tuning in from San Sebastian, north of Spain, closer to France. So it is 2:07 a.m. All right. An early morning for the 25th. So you're already on to Thursday here. So that's awesome. Kyle says, I just planned a ride share. Yep. Yeah, yep. And then Frosty D is saying shout out from Atlanta, Georgia. All right. We have people from all over. I love it. So with that being said, before we get into the articles here, like I've said on other episodes, we are having after shows after some of these episodes. We will have a brief after show after this show. So if you want to stick around and ask questions after we go through the content and finish up the episode information, then definitely do that. And you can ask questions. And especially if you have questions from maybe previous episodes we weren't able to get to, or just new questions that have come up, that's a great way to take advantage of that because we aren't always able to get to questions throughout the show, right? So with that being said, let's go ahead and flip over to my screen here and kick off the articles. All right, first article here, dependency confusion vulnerability found in archived Apache project. The Legit research team recently discovered a dependency confusion vulnerability in an archived Apache project. This discovery highlights the need to consider third-party projects and dependencies as potential weak links in the software development factory, especially archived open source projects that may not receive regular updates or security patches. In most cases, archived projects live on in organizations as legacy, an outcome of the infamous if it's not broken, don't fix it. Although it may seem tempting to leave them as is, these projects tend to have vulnerabilities that are not getting attention and not likely to be fixed. It says this type of attack occurs when referencing a private local package, which should be taken from a private registry rather than a public one. So this is the actual vulnerability. A malicious package with the same name appears on the public package manager. Thus, an unwanted public package is downloaded instead of the private package. This attack exploits a behavior in the package manager which looks for packages in the public domain first and then the private one. After the discovery of this type of attack, NPM and similar package managers introduce configurations that aim to prevent it and prioritize the private version over the public one. So I've definitely talked about NPM and some of these issues that have existed, right? Where basically you are downloading the wrong package, not the one that you wanted. It's some malicious package that somebody was able to upload or convince your system to download, right? So that's a serious issue, right? Especially when it's going to trust public first versus private, right? Public, open source, those kinds of things where it, can just pull from a crowdsource project or code base or something like that. So that's certainly an issue. I think one of the bigger issues with this article, especially, and it kind of touched on it initially, right, is this whole idea of supply chain, right? We've talked about supply chain a lot on this channel, on this show. But the idea of where are you getting code from, right? What are the vulnerabilities in that code? Is that code maintained? Is it updated? How often is it maintained or updated? Who is it updated by or maintained by, right? There are so many questions around code or products or services that you get from outside of your organization. It's not just applications that you use to monitor traffic or deploy firewalls or something, right? Not just that stuff, right? If you're developing applications or developing code and you're bringing in packages or code from other places, what kind of vetting process has that gone through? Have you reviewed it? Do you track any kind of advisories that are associated to that or bugs that are found in there, updates that are put into the code? All of those things matter. And frankly, a lot of companies don't do a great job of monitoring that, right? A lot of developers love to reuse code, right? And code reuse has tremendous advantages, no doubt, right? Like there are a lot of advantages to reusing code that's already developed. But certainly if you didn't develop the code, especially, right, in your company, you have to ask yourself all these questions. You have to answer all these questions and research these questions and really keep track of this stuff. That's why it's not as easy as just copying a repository and then using it, or taking a library and just implementing it in your software, right? There are all kinds of concerns that go along with that typically aren't considered, frankly. All right, and it just gives more about this actual one, but it also says importance of proper configuration for package managers. Although dependency confusion is based on a pretty simple idea, again, remember it's going for a public repo or public code base before private. It's a multifaceted issue that is not trivial to address. Attackers can exploit various layers of this vulnerability, including package naming conventions, package manager behaviors, and repository configurations to launch sophisticated attacks. Organizations must understand the depth of dependency confusion to effectively counteract these threats and protect their software ecosystems. So also think about this, right? Think about yesterday's episode. If you didn't watch it, definitely go check it out. Or if you haven't heard about this whole GitHub issue with Microsoft, but basically the idea is that you could upload code or malware or packages, libraries, things like that into these repositories that are trusted. So in this particular case, it was into a Microsoft repository. So the URL had Microsoft in it and everything like that. But it was done via the comment submission part, like that box, that form. So you put in the file or whatever it was, the code, and then you just don't even submit the comment, and then it still uploads that file or that code, and then you still have a link associated to that, so people could still download it and do all those things, right? Like it's becoming even more of an issue, more of a concern when things like that happen, because that's a serious issue, right? And then you start talking about this particular article and kind of tying those together, and now all of a sudden things get way worse, right? Like not only are you thinking you're pulling it from a trusted source, it's not the actual code you're thinking of, but it's coming from the legitimate account. So all kinds of issues. Let's see. Kyle says, with all the packages that are consistently used publicly, How come there aren't more built-in chain of custody tracking for the code pulled from public sources? Why not have an intermediate library? You know, there's all kinds of things that can be done to improve this, frankly. Uh, when a lot of this stuff about NPM came out, I think that was a year, maybe 2 years ago, something like that. Don't quote me on it. I don't remember exactly, but it's relatively recently, right? And that's kind of where some of this stuff started popping up as far as being more emphasized or more focused on. Um, Places like GitHub were starting to do some enhancements or some feature improvements as far as kind of tying the pieces together or making it easier to kind of decipher certain things like who contributed code and things like that, right? They're just feature enhancements to help with some of the these supply chain security issues. But frankly, I mean, the large emphasis on a lot of this stuff is relatively new, right? Like that example, the NPM example, was really one of the first major recent events where people really started kind of honing in on this supply chain stuff. But even like vendor risk management in general is not strong in a lot of companies, right? That is especially like if you're a small or medium-sized company, you probably don't have a great supply chain or vendor risk management, third-party risk management kind of program or processes in place. And so it's one of those things where it's going to probably take a little bit for some of this stuff to improve, and especially for those size companies, it's going to take some of these larger companies that are providing some of these services to kind of step in and help provide some of the stuff, especially like if it's open source. You run into resource limitations, funding limitations. Those are all kinds of things, right? And to add, Kyle says, SBOM has been advocated to since 2018. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time right now, right? I think certainly as as we push further and further, or closer and closer rather, towards automation and cloud deployments and kind of this further dependency on kind of those kinds of things, I think that will help force some of this stuff, but it's an evolution, right? Some of this stuff is just going to have to get improved over time in order for us to get there, and it's going to be through iterations, right? There's going to be, there's smaller steps that kind of add up to larger leaps eventually. That's kind of how I see it, because it seems like it kind of fluctuates as far as like improvements and features and things that are helping out with this stuff, right? Next article here, DPRK hacking groups breach South Korean defense contractors. National Police Agency in South Korea issued an urgent warning today about North Korean hacking groups targeting defense industry entities to steal valuable technology information. The police discovered several instances of successful breaches of defense companies in South Korea involving the hacking groups Lazarus and Dariel and Kimsuki, all part of the North Korean hacking apparatus. According to the announcement, the attackers breached the organizations by leveraging vulnerabilities in targets or their subcontractors' environments to plant malware capable to exfiltrate data. Look at that. Another supply chain issue. The police report highlights 3 cases involving each of the mentioned hacking groups displaying multifaceted attack methods aimed at stealing defense tech. Lazarus hackers exploited poorly managed network connection systems for testing and penetrated the internal networks of a defense company since November 2022, so for quite a while. It says they gathered critical data in at least 6 of the firm's computers and transferred it to a cloud server abroad. So they exfiltrated the data, took it out. Second attack was attributed to the Andariel group, who stole account information from an employee of a maintenance company that serviced defense subcontractors. So a third party was breached. Is this kind of clicking here? That's why I keep saying supply chain security, third party risk management, vendor risk management, right? We talked about this again yesterday but there have been several issues with third parties or subcontractors or vendors that are providing services to companies getting breached and then getting into other companies or having access to certain things, right? Target was a huge one that everybody seems to still talk about because it was a very relevant example, right? SolarWinds was another example, right? This whole idea of going after the vendor and then getting access to all of these companies, all of these customers of those companies, right? SolarWinds is a good one. If you haven't heard of that attack, maybe you're newer to this industry or this career field, I highly recommend going to check out the SolarWinds breach and the Target breach. Those two examples are very popular to talk about in the cybersecurity space around this kind of stuff. It says, so the second group, they used malware or they installed malware, leading to significant leaks of defense-related technical data. Pretty standard, right? Exfiltrated data. Third attack highlighted in the police's advisory, Kimsuki exploited a vulnerability in the email server of a defense subcontractor between April and July 2023, which allowed large files to be downloaded without the need to be authenticated. No! So, anytime data is being exfiltrated, if they can take a lot of data at once and you don't even catch that, you have some serious security issues, right? You should be catching massive amounts of data transfers, especially when you're using things like cloud, right? You can see spikes in the data. You can see spikes in cost, right? Because especially if you're taking data out of a cloud provider like AWS or something like that, that should probably trigger some alerts. Frosty D says some places don't vet their vendors very well and end up taking the fall for their shortcomings. Absolutely. Like I said, a lot of companies, especially small and medium-sized companies, really struggle with that because they might not have dedicated staff specifically to handle vendor onboarding or vendor risk management activities. And they might not have a security team that knows about it or cares about it, right? Like there's all kinds of possible situations where that are leading to your deficiencies as far as vendor risk management. So absolutely good comment. All right, let's move on here. Next article, Microsoft pulls fix for Outlook bug behind ICS security alerts. Microsoft has rolled back a fix for a known Outlook issue that was causing incorrect security alerts when opening ICS calendar files after installing the December Outlook desktop security updates. Affected Microsoft 365 users are seeing unexpected warnings that Microsoft Office has identified a potential security concern and that this location may be unsafe when double-clicking ICS files saved on their devices. December security updates triggering these alerts patch an Outlook information disclosure vulnerability CVE 2023-35636 that can let attackers steal NTLM hashes via maliciously crafted files and use them in Windows patch the hash attacks to access sensitive data or move laterally on the network. They say for users experiencing the issue, a temporary workaround is available until the fix is released, which requires using a registry key to disable the false security notifications. So disabling notifications, always dangerous, right? always dangerous to kind of get rid of those notifications, especially, for example, if the patch comes out, right? They update the patch and it doesn't force that to revert that setting, right? Think about that, right? If you disable a key security setting because the vendor tells you to, and then they don't undo it when they patch your system, or they can't undo it, and then you have to remember, but if you don't do it, then your users aren't going to get that error, and then all of a sudden you're in this weird spot, right, where they're not getting that error, they're doing what they're not supposed to do, but they don't know that they're not supposed to do it because they weren't getting the error. So yeah, always interesting. But with this article too, think about this in a patch management kind of scenario or perspective, right? A lot of patches and kind of how patching works is you will test it beforehand, right? Make sure it doesn't break things. and then you roll it out in waves. You would never roll out the patch to every single system because, like, for instance, with something like this, or maybe something more catastrophic, let's say it was causing blue screens of death, right? And you rolled out a patch to every system that you have all at once or very quickly. Well, that's going to create some issues, right? And then you're going to have to figure out how to undo that. That's why if you have issues, it's better to do it in waves because at least it's only a small subset of computers and you can just handle those computers or get those things back in working order and then figure out how to proceed, right? So I can't stress that enough. There are so many situations or examples of companies or vendors or technicians or administrators, engineers, whatever, right, that think that they're not gonna go with the tried and true process, the best practice of rolling out patches and phases or changes in phases, and they just push it out to everything because they're like, yeah, I'm going home for the weekend, right, or getting ready for the weekend. I don't want to spend all my time doing this, and then everything comes crashing down, and who looks bad, right? Like that is a very bad situation. Please, please, please don't generally avoid best practices. They're best practices for a reason, right? Because they work. And that's what people have had success with. So, makes me cringe. Miguel says similar events happen with local regional energy organizations lately in UE due to outdated or non-protected infrastructures. It generates a cascade of impacted resources, IT and OT environments. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with IT, with cybersecurity, with all of these things, is history repeats itself, right? History repeats itself. So that's why, experience is pretty important, or one of the reasons why experience is important, because throughout a career, let's say you have 20 years of experience as an example, right? Over that 20 years, you're going to have seen a lot of different examples of things that have happened or scenarios where you had to find a fix or resolve an issue, things like that, right? They might be different scenarios or different problems, right? Because they're different technology or something, but a lot of times they might be similar, right? They have similarities in how you approach that problem, maybe even some of the things that you do to fix that problem or resolve that problem. And so that's why experience can be helpful, right? And that's what you kind of find throughout your career is as you start getting experience, you start seeing kind of these repeating problems or repeating issues, and you get way better at solving them, right? That's the beautiful part, is because now you're like, yes, I saw something similar to this a couple years ago or 10 years ago. This is how we solved it, or this is what we did. This didn't work, but this did. And you can start kind of using that to your advantage, right? And I think that's one thing that newer people don't always understand, why experience can be valuable in comparison to just pure education, right? Or kind of like lab scenarios and those kinds of things, right? You can only go so far to simulate or emulate what might actually happen. So, all right. Next article here, Russian hackers claim cyber attack on Indiana water plant. And also too, before we hop into this article, just as a reminder, if you're just joining on the stream, we are going to do a brief after show after this episode. So if you have questions and you want to stick around after the episode, then make sure to do that for sure. All right, so back to the article here. The threat actor known as the Cyber Army of Russia posted a video on its Telegram channel over the weekend showing how the hackers allegedly interacted with the systems of the Tipton wastewater treatment plant. The group hasn't published any other details about the hack, but an Indiana official told CNN that the plant had indeed been a victim of a cyber attack on Friday evening, prompting plant managers to send maintenance personnel to investigate the suspicious activity. Interesting. It says the Cyber Army of Russia announced its purported operation against TMU a few days after the Google-owned security firm Mandiant released a report claiming that the group is linked to another Russian state actor, Sandworm, and was responsible for an attack on a water facility in Texas in January. The attack caused a tank at a water facility in mule shoe, Texas to overflow. Mandiant said it cannot independently verify this intrusion or the group's links to APT44. However, researchers noted that officials from the affected U.S. utilities publicly acknowledged incidents at entities advertises victims in a video that the Cyber Army of Russia posted on its channel. So this is one thing that we're starting to see more and more of, right? Is this kind of idea of attackers going after things like critical infrastructure, water plants, power plants, all of those kinds of things, right? And certainly that becomes more and more of an issue, right? Because some of these kind of facilities might be running older technology that's been around for a while. Hopefully they're not running Windows XP, right? But one of the things with a lot of these systems too is this idea of internet connected systems, right? Like, are these power plant systems that are actually running the power plant, are they actually connected to the internet or are they isolated, right? Sometimes, they might be, right? And then that becomes an issue as far as like patching, how are they maintained? Even if they're not connected to the internet, how secure are they? Could somebody just walk in and plug a USB drive into one of these computers? There's a lot of issues with that, right? Because think of that critical infrastructure, power, water, those kinds of things that are key to people living, right? So if you're, in this kind of industry or this area of cybersecurity where you're focused on these kind of systems, I'd love to hear more about, the things that you're doing to keep some of this stuff protected. Obviously, don't share confidential information or things that you're not supposed to, but it's really fascinating how we're starting to focus more and more on this stuff and really try to hopefully amp up the security of this stuff, right? I mean, you hear a lot of the politicians and people in the news talking a lot about the power grid and how are we going to protect the power grid from cyber attack. You hear people saying that could be the potential next major catastrophe, right? Is somebody attacking a power grid and taking it down entirely, especially as we're more and more connected in in today's world. Everything is connected. Our refrigerators, our cars, right? Whatever, Teslas. But all the things that we have are all connected in some way, right? So it becomes a big issue. And Miguel corrected the EU, European Union. Got it. All right. Let's keep moving here. Take a quick drink out of my cyber threat intel mug. Make sure to grab yours if you don't have one already. Link is in the description. All right, next article here. Siemens working on fix for device affected by Palo Alto firewall bug. Siemens is urging organizations using its rugged COM APE 1808 devices configured with Palo Alto Networks PAN virtual next generation firewall to implement workarounds for a maximum severity 0-day bug that PAN recently disclosed in its next gen firewall product. Command injection vulnerability identified as CVE 2024-3400 affects multiple versions of PAN OS firewalls when certain features are enabled on them. An attacker has been exploiting the flaw to deploy a novel Python backdoor on affected firewalls. Palo Alto Networks itself has said it is aware of a growing number of attacks leveraging CVE 2024-3400 and has warned about proof of concept code for the flaw being publicly available. So it looks like that could be a real thing, right? According to Siemens, its rugged COM APE 1808 product, commonly deployed as an edge device in industrial control environments, so remember, ICS, is vulnerable to the issue. Siemens described all versions of the product with PAN virtual next generation firewall configured with the Global Protect Gateway or Global Protect Portal or both as affected by the vulnerability. They pointed to their advisory pointed to PAN's recommendation to disable Global Protect Gateway and Global Protect portal and reminded customers that the features are already disabled by default in RuggedCom APE 1808 deployment environments. So, with this, right, and they say Siemens urged customers as a general rule to protect network access to devices and industrial control environments with appropriate mechanisms, saying in order to operate the devices in a protected IT environment, Siemens recommends to configure the environment according to Siemens operational guidelines for industrial security. So a few different things here, right? When you have devices, software, everything like that, are you tracking vendor advisories, right? People aren't always doing that, which is an issue. Ideally, right, the vendor will notify people that have purchased their devices in some fashion, right? If you log into a portal or you get notified via email, hopefully they don't send you a letter in the mail, right? That would be worthless. But, getting notified that there is some kind of vulnerability. You as a cybersecurity professional, you should be tracking issues like this, especially when you have products or services, you're using vendors, tracking their advisories so you understand how that's going to affect you, right? Watching shows like Cyber Threat Intel, right? That's another good way. But being aware of things that are going on, because if there's a vulnerability, you want to address it as soon as possible, right? This goes to your vulnerability management plan and how severe the vulnerability is, how quickly you need to resolve it, all those kinds of things, right? But then also, if the vendor provides a recommendation or something that you should do to minimize the risk, you should do it, right? But how are you going to know that unless you're tracking the advisories? So that is really important. Again, I mean, this is with industrial control systems, so ICS environments. You have to be careful, right? Don't have a device like this that is super vulnerable on the power grid, for example, right? Because it's just going to make the problem worse. Article also says it's unclear how many of those exposed instances are in industrial control systems, so ICSs, and operational technology OT settings, but generally, internet exposure continues to be a major issue in ICS and OT environments. So I talked about this a few minutes ago, right? Some of these networks may be internet connected, right? And especially in industrial control systems, power plants, wastewater systems, water plants, all those kinds of things are your critical systems that are operating whatever you're doing connected to the internet. And that applies to other organizations too, or other industries, because you may not want to have your system connected to the internet. There's a lot of risk with having a system connected to the internet, no doubt, right? I mean, if you've ever looked up how long it takes to for a Windows XP computer to get compromised in today's environment, in today's world, it's really fast, right? And that's just an example of an old operating system, right? But the internet is a dangerous place, right? So if you're not patching, if you're not doing all of these core things, you're even more vulnerable than if you are. Just because you're doing those things doesn't mean you're secure, right? There's still a lot of issues, a lot of risk with being connected to the internet. All right, next article here. Iranian nationals charged with hacking U.S. companies, Treasury, and State departments. The U.S. government on Tuesday took sweeping action against 4 Iranian nationals, accusing them of participating in hacking operations that targeted the U.S. Treasury and State departments, defense contractors, and 2 New York-based companies on behalf of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. And Miguel says, many times service delivery and infra managers don't consider necessary to set up a solid SLA, OLA with vendors for updates, patching, and DR planning. Face many of them lack of security culture by far. Absolutely, right? There are core things that you have to do if you are working in IT, in cybersecurity, in a tech job, right? You just have to do these things. They are things that you might not know about or think about when you're first starting your career, right? But again, experience, right? As you get experience, as you kind of rise the ranks as far as seniority, it's your responsibility to understand these certain things have to happen and that you have to do them in some cases, right? Depending on your role, you might be the one that has to take the reins and actually do this stuff. So absolutely, yeah, it's as much as cybersecurity is making inroads in companies, it's not quite there. Back to the article here. All four were indicted and charged with conspiracy to commit computer fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and wire fraud. Every time, pretty much, with hacking and computer crimes, right? Usually one of the charges is around wire fraud, at least one of the charges, right? They each face up to 5 years in prison for the computer fraud conspiracy charge and up to 20 years in prison for each count of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, the U.S. Department of Justice said in a statement. Wonder if they would let them run that concurrently, right? Like run the sentences at the same time. So they got like 5 20-year charges. Would they let them just run them concurrently, or would they be like, no, you have to run them in order or whatever? So, yeah, yeah, 100 years, right? The four were also sanctioned by the Treasury Department, and the State Department is offering a reward up to $10 million and possibly relocation for any information on the three of the men or the companies with whom they're associated. I mean, that's a pretty substantial reward, right? Would you turn somebody in for that amount of money? That's quite a lot of money, right? That's definitely game-changing money for most of us, right? Like, yeah. So I think with this one, one of the things that you just have to keep in mind is that if you hack, if you do bad things, right, especially if you do it to governments, especially the US government, they're going to come after you, and they are getting really good at finding people. So it may take some time, but they are getting really good at finding people, and they are just getting better all the time. So all these people that hack, for a year, 2 years, 3 years, right? These major hacks, they're getting swept up pretty quick. So yeah, like, doing these kind of schemes and stuff for a couple years and then spending, 5, 10, 20, 30 years in prison for it. I don't know if that's worth it, right? That doesn't seem worth it to me. I mean, I would never do it, but that just doesn't seem like it's worth it. So I guess that's why sometimes too we see people commit these crimes and go to other countries. But guess what? We've seen articles too where they are coordinating with authorities in other countries and they're still getting swept up, right? They're still coming and kicking in your door and taking you off to prison, right? Or extraditing you back to the US or whatever country. So we've talked about several articles like that already on this show. So it's a real thing. I would not go down that route personally. And I don't recommend you do that either. All right. So with that being said, that is the last article for this episode. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 23. It is Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. Depending on where you're watching the show, where you're listening to it, remember there's a few different ways you can find us. We'll always do the live stream on YouTube. So the John Good Cyber YouTube channel, check us out there. If you want to get involved, if you want to participate in the stream, chat, all those kinds of things, because we do have the chat on the screen. And we answer questions, we get involved, we participate on here. We're also on the John Good Cyber LinkedIn page, also on the John Good Cyber Twitter or X profile, and then John Good Cyber page on Facebook. If you want to watch the on-demand replay, live stream, all those good things. If you want to listen on the audio format, you can go to your favorite podcasting platform, search for Cyber Threat Intel, and we'll pop up on there. Or you can go to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com, and you can find all the platforms that we're on there. You can also find the article feed on the website. So if you want to see all the articles we talked about in this episode, in other episodes, or we add other articles too, right? Put highlights, put notes, all kinds of things like that. And you can check out all that as well. Alexis says, thanks for the stream. I found your channel and it's been all great information so far.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alexis. Thank you. I appreciate it. Love seeing new faces, or I guess new new usernames here on the stream. So enjoy that. Enjoy seeing familiar faces or familiar names on here as well. So with that being said, that is the last article for this episode. Again, we are going to do a brief after show after this, so we'll hang around for a few minutes after if you have questions. But otherwise, if you don't want to hang around for the after show, I want to thank you for joining the show, and I'll see you in the next one. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cybertraining Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. Cybertrainingpro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community, where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. There's so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today. Hey, everybody. Glad to see some of you stuck around. Just moving my screens around, getting things reorganized a little bit different when it's not for the show. So, give me 1 second here. Windows is usually pretty good about maintaining like screen size and stuff, but I wish it was a little bit better on some of the windows. So, but anyways, and Miguel said, "Take care, thank you, John." You're welcome, Miguel. You're welcome. I know it was earlier for you. I think you said it was like 2 o'clock or something in the morning. So glad that you could join, though. Glad to have you on. Let's see. Kyle says, "I unfortunately had to walk away for 15 minutes in the middle, but have been on an AI kick. Any thoughts on leveraging AI?" Put this up here. Yeah, so I mean, I guess it depends on what context, you're talking about for leveraging AI. AI is definitely, its usage is definitely increasing, right? People are using ChatGPT and all kinds of things to, to do things, right? Create code, search through text. So there's definitely a lot of uses for it. I think it's still one of those things where it depends on the data that you're feeding it, right? And how relevant or accurate that data is and the use case, right? Because it's not good enough for some use cases, right? There are definitely still some things that it still needs to evolve more for. But I think generally, there are certainly things that you could use it for. You could find a use case for. So yeah, for sure. Let's see, let's throw this one up here. Jetsui says, "I'm 19, looking to become a cybersecurity engineer. Is it too late for me to join? I have no background or experience, and I'm going to college for cybersecurity soon." Yeah, It's definitely too late to join. 19 is way too old. You are way too old. Just way too old to even join the workforce. No, 19 is so early on in your career. Like there are people that are 50, 60 years old that are getting into cybersecurity. So no, it's not too it's not too late. Good luck in college though. That'll be fun. Make sure that you really hammer on the fundamentals. You know, that is certainly, because I don't know where you're at, right? If you're in the US or I think you said where you were at earlier. Let's see. Yeah, New York City. So, you know, one of the things that people going to college, they kind of lose track of is they start trying to go too fast, especially if you're in college. You're going to have, I mean, you're not saying you didn't say what kind of degree program, if it's like associates or bachelor's or whatever, but, you know, 2 years or 4 years, 5 years, whatever, right? Like you're going to have this big chunk of time. So really use that time to your advantage. Really hammer down the fundamentals, get to know everything really well, right? So you really use that time well. Don't be in such a rush that you are trying to get to like the highest level certification possible and you kind of skip over some stuff because it's going to come back to bite you. But you have a lot of time to learn stuff. Yeah, wish Windows would allow window to span different desktops, replying to your window size comment. Yeah, I mean, there's like pros and cons of every operating system. I mean, let's be honest. But yeah, especially like if you're switching between stuff or you have different use cases, you plug in different monitors or something, right? There's all these kinds of different use cases where I get it, it doesn't apply to everybody. Like it's very specific use cases, but I wish that it worked. Like I wish it worked better. Have you ever heard of Darknet Diaries? It's a really good podcast about cybersecurity and all the different types of crimes that happen all over the world. Yep, I've heard of Darknet Diaries. There's a lot of good episodes on there. People just telling their stories, and it's not all like the interesting part is that it's not all like good stuff, right? Like he interviews people that were the malicious person, right? And that's absolutely interesting because some of these people have just fascinating stories, right? Like it's fascinating to hear that side of the equation versus like, you know, hearing the good guys side of it, right? Like, oh, every story is like we had to run around with our hair on fire and trying to figure out what was going on, and we patched our software and changed our passwords. It's like obviously that gets boring eventually, right? Hearing the same kind of story like that. Whereas like the bad guys, every malicious person or bad person, right, has different stories. They have different experiences that kind of drive what they were doing and why they were doing it. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting episodes on there. Definitely a very, very popular show. Smashing Security is another very entertaining security podcast. Yep. I mean, there's a lot of good ones out there, right? There's a lot of different perspectives on things and different experiences, different scenarios. Like there's a lot of great content out there. So thank you. Should I even go to college for cybersecurity or learn it yourself through courses? There are pros and cons to every decision, right? Pros and cons to every decision. I personally have 2 degrees, right? So there are a lot of advantages to going to college, right? It's not for everybody, for sure, right? And there's different kinds of universities out there. different kinds of programs. Depends on what you're looking to do, depends on your ability to fund it, right? Long term, right, it is generally better to have a degree than not have a degree. That's just, a fact, right? Especially in really any career field, right? Because that can help set you apart, especially if you're trying to get to higher level positions, right? A management job, sometimes even lead jobs, senior manager jobs, directors, executives, right? Like all of those jobs, you're definitely going to want to have a degree because it'll come back to bite you and those kind of jobs, or trying to get those kind of jobs if you don't have one. So now that being said, there are a lot of people that will go work, figure out that they like the career field, because that's kind of one thing too, is like some people get degrees in career fields that they end up not liking, but they didn't know that until they actually started working in there. So you will see that too. People will go work for a while, decide they like it, and then they'll go back and get a degree just to kind of check that box or take care of that requirement. So, but is it required to get into cybersecurity? No, but long term it is beneficial, right? So, but there's a lot that goes into that decision. And again, pros and cons to both, right? To both decisions, going to college or not going to college. Yep, starting with the basics is always good. Check out my ebook. There's a link in the description, and you'll be able to get my ebook and see the roadmap that I've laid out for you. But yeah, you have so much time if you're only 19. So here's one of the things: if you're 19 and you're trying to go into the workforce, you have less time to kind of start making an impact or start getting in the career field, because depending on your situation, you might need money, you might need to work like pretty quick, right? If you're going to college, then you have more time, more of a gap where you can kind of build up skills and build up things that you need and those kinds of things. But either way, regardless, you have to start from the beginning, right? But it's a matter of how fast you have to ramp up. And yeah, it can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming at any point, but certainly up front, because there's a lot of things that are going to be the first time that you see them, right? Because you're probably not going to know a lot of the information or have ever seen it until you start learning it, really, right? That's just how it is. So. And also too, it's like initially you're gonna have to learn a lot, like very broad, because that's the foundation. It's kind of like when you're starting out, your foundation that you're learning, it's very broad, like a house, right? It's that foundation. And then as you get up to like a specialty or like a senior level and like more experience in your career, it's like a pyramid, right? Because at the top, it's very focused on specific areas. So it's not a ton of information. You're just going very deep into certain areas. If that helps, explain that. The idea that you can get into cybersecurity without a degree is a very new idea that a lot of companies don't embrace yet. Times will change though, in my honest opinion. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of job areas that still want degrees, or companies that require them for various reasons. Like, there are legitimate reasons why somebody might ask for a degree, but a lot of times making it a firm requirement, especially like for early on jobs, entry level, those kinds of things, it's not sorry, I was looking at my screen. It started one of my screens started playing an ad, so I was making sure I'm not playing the ad. So there are certain situations where it might happen, but to make it a firm requirement, especially like entry level and those kinds of early on jobs, is not as productive. But frankly, I think why a lot of them do it is because they're also trying to sort through candidates, right? One of the challenges with entry level especially is being able to filter through candidates and kind of sort through them, because you're talking about jobs that might get a couple hundred applications or 1,000 applications. How are you going to go through jobs like that or applications like that when literally everybody looks very similar, right? Because that's what happens. A lot of people have very similar qualifications, and if you've ever heard me on other streams, just talking in general about this stuff, it's like a lot of people go for the very basic kind of things, like the certifications, and so their credentials and resume looks very similar. So the degree is one other criteria that can be used to filter through candidates that relatively look very similar. Will they kind of get out of requiring it or making it a firm requirement in some cases for the entry-level jobs? I don't know, maybe, we'll see. But for the higher level jobs and stuff, it's not going away, right? Like, it's just like that with any other career field, right? There are so many other career fields that are very similar, where it's like, if you're gonna be a director, a manager, executive, those kinds of things, they're gonna require degrees, right? It's just how it is. So, because a lot of the people too that don't have the degrees at those kind of like experience levels, like let's say 20 years, if you don't have a degree, you've probably gone the specialization route, and hopefully you've gotten really good at a certain area. So, but specialists, like very good specialists, are focused on a certain area. They don't typically want to be very broad, which tends to be management level jobs, right? You're overseeing a lot of different things, dealing with people, those kinds of things. So we'll see though. Yeah, I mean, maybe in 5 years that'll be different. Maybe in 10 years it'll be different. We'll see, right? Absolutely. You have to know a lot about a lot of things, right? Like, especially early on. Early on, you kind of get hit with it like a fire hose, right? Like, it's like, oh boy, this is a lot to know. But the good news is a lot of it builds on itself. So it's absolutely not entry level. Yeah, I mean, I'm there. Yeah, like, I would say that typically when people are making the complaint or the comment about cybersecurity being entry level, they are thinking of it in the context of it being like, you can come in at ground zero, right, of knowledge, and that is like entry level, right? Because a lot of other career fields, when they think of entry level, they think of, I can come in, not know hardly anything, right, or know nothing, and I can work my way up, right? That is certainly not the case in cybersecurity, right? The ground zero of being qualified or proficient in cybersecurity is not at zero, right? Like, you have a certain level that you have to get to but you could technically get to that level before starting work, right? Before even getting into the career field. And then you are technically, from a knowledge and skill standpoint, you are not entry level, right? You are maybe entry level to cybersecurity because you have the basics covered, right? You know about networks and operating systems and all of those kinds of things. You have a decent base understanding of security. But yeah, that is a long discussion that we are not going to have on this stream. Like, that is, yeah. That is a way longer discussion than I'm ready to have right this minute. So, it's a way of life. It's a way of life. Security isn't an entry-level way of life. Yeah, I mean, again, just going back to what I said, it's a long discussion, right? So, well, I'm glad you could catch the content too. I love all the interactions and having people, join in, participate with the shows and the streams. And like I said, I think I said it in the episode, but I've been doing these Monday through Thursday. I think we're almost at about a month, a little over a month. So, but yeah, Monday through Thursday. So basically 4 times a week, we'll generally be doing these and having after shows after some of them, right? The goal is to have an after show after 1 to 2 of them per week. And that's been pretty consistent. So, and certainly if there's a lot of like engagement and people, hopping on and joining in, then we'll definitely lean towards that 2 a week. But it just kind of depends, right? It'll vary based on what's going on and everything. But yeah, love having everybody hop on here. It's always good to have a good showing, right? So, all right. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And so we'll wrap up this episode, this after show. And want to thank everybody for joining, for tuning in, and also for hanging out for the live stream. That is always much appreciated. So love seeing everybody hop on, and make sure to grab some merch if you're interested in supporting the channel or checking out the description. A lot of ways you can support the channel and the content. Just showing up is great too, right? Watching, liking the content, commenting, all that stuff, right? So thanks everybody for showing up, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for stopping by.